Hey guys, and welcome to my Haudenosaunee Civ Overview. In this video I'll be going over the unique units and technologies of the Civ, as well as the unique and team cards, and finally showing off some gameplay so you guys can get an idea of how the civilization plays overall. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into this. So let's go ahead and start with the civilization bonus. So their Civ bonus is that they begin with the travois that constructs buildings for free. Now generally this will be used at the beginning of the game to build their longhouse, which is essentially their house to increase their pop limit, or their pop cap by 15. It does kind of feed into an overall theme with the Civ, which is that they can get a lot of these free travois, which is kind of a way to get free wood essentially, because these travois can build, war huts, their barracks, farms and estates, all that kind of stuff later. But right off the bat, they start with this free one, which is kind of nice. They get the free house at the beginning of the game. You save on some wood. So definitely, yeah, I mean, a pretty good Civ bonus helps them get a pretty fast start. So definitely a useful Civ bonus to help them out economically. And yeah, I think it's pretty cool because it keeps kind of with their theme of getting these travois throughout the game. So that's their Civ bonus. I'm going to do something a little different from my other videos now, and I'm actually going to show you guys the unique units in the scenario editor so I can show you guys all the statistics. So let's go ahead and hop into that. So now into the unique units, and I find the best way for me to understand the unique units of these kind of civs is just to compare them to their European counterparts. So that's what I've set up here in the scenario editor for us to look at. So first up we have the AOE, which is kind of the European equivalent of the crossbow here. So in comparison to the crossbow, think of it kind of like a slightly more expensive, but stronger than the crossbow. So crossbows cost 40 food and 40 wood. These cost exclusively food, but they cost 100 food. So in some sense they're more expensive, but if you're going for all food strat or something, then in some sense they might, be comparable. It just kind of depends what resource you have more of. Food's obviously easier to get in the early game, so in some sense there's sort of just a stronger crossbow if you think of them like that. They have 30% range resist versus the crossbow 20% range resist. And they have a slightly more HP, 110 versus 100, and they're slightly faster, 1 extra move speed. Their multipliers are pretty much the same, except they do have a 2x multiplier versus heavy infantry here versus the 1.25x of the crossbowmen. They still have the 2x versus light range cav and 0.75x versus all cav. So yeah, just think of them as a slightly more expensive and stronger crossbow. So pretty good unit. Next we have the Tomahawk. These guys look really cool, but they're actually not as good as I originally thought. So they're very comparable to a normal musketeer. You can see they have the same health, move speed, and resistance. However, they do have less attack. So they have, let's see, four less ranged attack, slightly more hand attack, 1 extra hand attack. They cost 75 food and 25 wood versus 75 food and 25 gold. So they cost wood instead of gold basically, and they have less range attack. So overall, just think of them as, I guess, a weaker, a unit that's weaker than Musketeers outrange, but they're slightly cheaper since they cost wood instead of gold. But very comparable stats overall. Same multipliers versus cav and everything like that. Or sorry, actually they have a 0.25x extra versus light infantry, but overall pretty much the same. Next we have the Forest Prowler. Very good unit, very fun unit too. So this unit can actually stealth, and actually I'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, overall if you look at these stats, they're almost identical, the normal Skirmisher and the Forest Prowler. I believe they even cost the same, 50 food, 65 gold. Skirmisher costs 50 food, 65 gold. So yeah, they even cost the same. The Forest Prowler has 10 less health, and it has 1 extra attack. So slightly less health, but slightly more attack than the Skirmisher. But it has a stealth mode. So in my opinion, they're just an overall better unit than Skirmisher because of that in particular, because you can use them for some awesome ambush tactics where you stealth. They bring in their whole army, and then you can stealth out your Skirmishers and start hitting them. So I just think of them as just an almost identical version of the Skirmisher, but with stealth. So I think overall just a better unit than a Skirmisher. Very cool unit. Next we have the Kanya Horseman here. So this is pretty comparable to a normal Hussar. And you'll see kind of a trend here. A lot of these, aside from Forest Prowler and stuff, they're kind of just like a cheaper, at least in gold terms, but weaker version of a lot of these European units. So you'll see the Kanya Horseman costs 100 food, 75 wood, versus 120 food, 80 gold. So it costs less food and it costs wood instead of gold. It has less HP, although it does have 10% extra range resist. So tankiness wise, they're probably kind of close because of the extra range resist. But they do have 3 less hand attack and 2 less siege attack. However, these guys do have a 1.75x bonus multiplier versus artillery, which Hussars do not have. But overall, I mean, they're very comparable to Hussars and how they act generally. So just think of them in general as pretty equivalent to a Hussar. They're probably just a slightly bit weaker and but also cheaper, or in some sense cheaper. You know, they mainly cost wood instead of gold, so just keep that in mind. And then next we have the Musket Rider here. So these guys are very comparable to Dragoons from European civs. They do have 5 extra HP. They have 30% more ranged. They have 10% more ranged resist damage. So basically overall they're tankier than normal Dragoons. They have 1 extra siege attack. They have 2 less ranged attack. So yeah, overall pretty comparable. They cost 55 food, 100 gold versus 90 food, 90 gold. So they cost a lot less food, but they cost 10 more gold. So kind of a trade-off there, I guess. I would say overall, I think they're kind of like a better version of the Dragoon. I mean, I'll trade 10 gold for what I think almost 40 less food or something. I think that's a pretty good trade in my opinion. Looks like they have a 0.5x more bonus damage versus artillery also. So yeah, I mean, slightly tankier, slightly less attack, but overall, because I would say they're a little cheaper, maybe not in terms of gold, but just overall, I would look at them as kind of like an upgrade to the normal Dragoon in a lot of ways, but overall pretty comparable. Next we have the Light Cannon. So this unit is pretty interesting. So it actually has the same movement speed and out of limber mode. So you put it in limber mode, it still has 3 movement speed, whereas this has about half of that at 1.6, and in limber mode it goes to 4. So the Falconet will be faster than the Light Cannon in limber mode, but out of limber mode it's a lot slower. So this could be a good or a bad thing. If you are traveling long distances, obviously Light Cannon is worse, but if you're just in a normal battle, I mean, this thing is pretty maneuverable, and you can just keep it in firing mode, obviously, because it doesn't matter whether it's in limber mode or not, which is kind of a weird thing. And the Haudenosaunee can also get some other upgrades to make their siege faster. So these guys will actually be pretty maneuverable. So yeah, I mean, if you kind of like having really maneuverable artillery, this is going to be super useful for you because you can kind of use them, get back in your defensive line. They're not as vulnerable to cav because of that. So that's pretty interesting. Overall, let's get into the stats here. So let's see. They're basically kind of like a cheaper version of the Falconet, so they cost 100 less gold. They cost 300 gold and 100 wood. They have slightly less attack, so they have 30 bombard attack versus 100, and slightly less area damage, so they have, let's see, 3 area versus 2 area. They do have a little more range, so they have 32 range versus Falconet's 26 range. But they also have a slower rate of fire, so Falconets have 4 rate of fire, these have 6. So higher range, higher mobility, less overall damage, or less damage output, and lower because of the lower area effects and lower damage. So I don't know. I don't really know which one's better. I think honestly in a lot of cases I kind of like the Light Cannon more because of how maneuverable it can be in between battles. And it does slightly less damage, but it's not a ton though. And I think you kind of make up for it with how maneuverable it can be. And since it's cheaper, you can get more of them to make up for that. I think they also cost 4 population versus 5 populations. Yeah, so you can definitely build more of them. So yeah, I mean, pretty comparable. Just think of Light Cannon as slightly cheaper, slightly weaker version of this, but that doesn't mean it's worse because it's more maneuverable. It's not just straight up worse. Yeah, so I don't know, they're just different. It kind of depends on your playstyle, I think, a lot too. I would say overall people would say Falconet is stronger just because of the damage output, but these will stay alive longer, I think, and put out more DPS over a longer period of time. They do have a 50 less HP too, I should note. So yeah, they're definitely going to go down faster, but they can get out of bad situations. Or I'd say they're more likely to get out of bad situations than falconets are. So yeah, kind of depends on what you want, but they are overall just pretty comparable. Next we have the Ram. So the Ram is kind of a strange unit. I don't know if I really like the unit. It's kind of it can only attack buildings, has 75 siege attack. Yeah, so it's kind of a strange unit. It's very vulnerable. Obviously, it only has 200 HP, 50% range resist. So it's not even that tanky, and it can only attack buildings. And even the siege attack is 75, a pretty fast siege attack, but still, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you can get these. You might get them in a shipment or something, and you can use them. I think overall, I just don't see them being that good. If they have more health, you know, maybe, but the problem is they can't even soak up very much damage because, yeah, they have 50% range resist, but they only have 200 HP, so, yeah, I mean, they're still going to go down pretty fast. However, they are cheap. They're only 80 food, 120 wood, so they're definitely, like, one of the cheapest siege units. So in terms of that, you can get a lot of them and kind of span them and kind of mix them in with your army, so I wouldn't say they're terrible. They're just kind of like a very unique and strange unit, and it's kind of hard to know like when it's useful to use these versus when it's not. So I think generally people avoid it because of that, because if you do waste them, you know, they're cheap, but you're still wasting resources using them if you're not able to use them effectively. So that's what I would say about them. I think they're hard to use effectively, but I mean, I don't think they're straight up a bad unit. I think it's just kind of like a niche situation where they would be handy to have. But yeah, in the same kind of vein, but a little different, we have their other unique siege weapon, which is actually, I think this is probably my favorite siege weapon in the game just because it's so unique. I think it's really cool. So this is the Mantlet. So they basically have a little wooden wall here, and they can like throw axes from behind it, and they also have higher siege damage. So this isn't really comparable to anything else in the game, I would say. I mean, the closest thing I could give you to think of is, think of if you took like 2 or 3 musketeers and like combined them into this one unit, and then gave them, or yeah, I mean, I think that's the closest way to put it. If you took like 2 musketeers unit and combined it into a single unit, you would get something like this. So you have 400 HP and 50% range resist, so it's definitely pretty tanky. It only has 25 range attack, which is pretty equivalent to 1 musketeer, so versus units, it's really not that effective. But I mean, it's also not that much more expensive than normal units. 75 wood and 125 gold, so you know, it's not 400 gold, it's 125 gold, and it only costs 2 population. You can also get a card to make this only 1 population. So I mean, think about that. You can get this siege weapon. It only takes up 1 population space, and yeah, it's a little bit expensive, but it's not terrible. And yeah, I mean, at 1 population, I mean, that's equivalent to Musketeer, except it also has double the siege damage of 1 Musketeer, and it's 400 HP. I mean, that's pretty insane. Like, if you have the money to make these, that's actually pretty insane if you really think about it. Think about 1 population of this versus 1 population of Musketeer. What does more work? I mean, clearly this thing is going to destroy, you know, 1 Musketeer. And so, yeah, I mean, in terms of efficiency of pop space, this will be like a really good unit if you get to that point in the game. Yeah, so equivalent attack to Musketeer, double the siege damage basically of a Musketeer. Pretty terrible hand attack. Obviously, you do not want these guys in hand combat, and you do not want them being hit by artillery. They are very weak to both of those things. So in that sense, they're pretty similar to normal infantry, except they have this very good siege attack. So situations where you kind of want to use these is if you're sieging the enemy base, and you can kind of have these guys as your front line attacking their buildings, and then their skirmishers will be shooting these guys, but they have this 50% range resist, so they'll be soaking up all that damage, and you can just pick off their units while they're attacking these guys, and they do want to attack these guys because they're killing their buildings with the 50 siege attack. So they have their use. I would say that is kind of their one use, is you do kind of need to be on the front foot in terms of you have to be the aggressor, I think, to make the most use out of these. Like, you basically have to be sieging the enemy base, and you want these guys out front soaking up the volley fire. So in that situation, they are very useful, I would say. However, I wouldn't say they're amazing just because they want to be out front, but they're also they're still very weak to artillery fire. So if they have falconets, they're still going to shred these guys. So They're okay, I would say. I think in the right situation, mixed in with your normal army, and if you are later in the game with the one population space, I would say they'll be very good. In normal situations, I would say they're decent, but not great, because they can still be shredded by artillery or horses and things like that. So, yeah, definitely a very interesting unit. And I think, you know, the one nice thing about this Civ in general and this unit in particular is, you know, a lot of people probably won't even know what this unit does or like know how to react to it. So that can be to your advantage a lot of times if you're sieging their base with these guys. They're either not going to realize that they're doing a ton of siege damage and their buildings will just crumble, or they'll know that but maybe they don't know like how to counter it effectively. So yeah, either way you go, like the enemies might not react correctly to these guys, in which case you'll get the upper hand and be able to probably wipe them out. So definitely try these guys out. I think they're a very cool unit. But yeah, that's all the unique units. Let's go ahead and move back to the tech tree and look at the unique buildings. So now for the unique buildings. First we have the longhouse, which is basically their version of a normal house. So instead of 100 wood, it costs 125 wood. So it costs 25 more wood, but it does provide 15 population. These can also be upgraded with a particular card to give them a ranged attack. So I don't know if these are like better than normal houses. They're kind of just a little bit different. So yeah, they're basically just kind of a different kind of house, a little bit more expensive, but supports a little bit extra population. So not too much different than a normal house. Just know that it'll cost you a little bit more wood. Then we have the siege workshop. So I mean, I think this is only listed as unique because this is a native. It's a native civilization, not a European one. And then the other native civs don't get siege workshops, so I think that's why it's called out as unique here. But I mean, it's essentially an artillery foundry, really, and it trains all these unique artillery that are unique to Haudenosaunee Civ. So you have some interesting ones here that we just went over, like the light cannon and the ram and the mantlet. And then you can also get the big button for the siege drill to create these faster. You can also get a lot of cards that we'll go over in a minute that can actually upgrade your artillery to make them faster, stronger, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, their siege workshop is pretty interesting. It's a very unique blend of, you know, the normal European artillery foundry and kind of like a native take on it. So definitely pretty cool to see this for a native Civ. Then we have the unique ceremonies. So we have the founder ceremony. The founder ceremony spawns Travois over time. I actually didn't think this was good at first, and then I started reading up about it, and this is actually a very good ceremony. Now, and like, you know, I don't know, even in team games, it's actually really good. I was thinking at first in team games it wouldn't be as useful, but the thing about these Travois is you have to remember you can make these like into anything, and like you can make these into houses, but you can also make these into farms, estates. You can make them into war huts. So these are gonna save you a ton of wood. In normal games, you're usually gonna use these for like houses, if you really need a population, or preferably for war huts to save you more wood, and that'll help you get your military going in kind of 1v1 or 2v2 games. But even let's say if you want to play these guys in team games, like a boom into a 3v3, 4v4 kind of game. I mean, these are still really good because think about it like this: like you can spawn these and you can get farms and estates for free. So you'll spawn these, you can make them into a farm, and you can transition to farming way easier than any other civilization can. So actually, I think it's probably like one of the best native ceremonies, economy-wise at least, because it's very good to save on wood, and it's good in both the situation where, you know, you're in 1v1 and you just need those war huts or those houses, or, you know, if you're trying to boom and you need farms and estates and all that kind of stuff. Either way, it's going to help out a lot. So definitely a very good ceremony here. Then we have the Earth Mother ceremony. So the Earth Mother ceremony increases the population cap. Now, ironically, originally I thought this ceremony was the amazing one and this one wasn't. I've kind of flipped my sentiment. I think Founder ceremony is the amazing one, and Earth Mother ceremony isn't nearly as good as you'd think. On paper, this seems amazing, right? You know, you get 25. I think it's one population cap increase per villager. So let's say you have 5 villagers praying at the community plaza. Then you are gathering at it rather. I think for each villager you get 1 extra population space. So if you had 5, you get 5 extra population space, which I don't think is really as good as it would seem at first. Because think about it, like if you put 25 villagers on this, which is the max, you have 25 extra population space. So you can get 25 more military, but You just sacrifice 25 villagers. Now, however, there is a caveat there. You can just replace the 25 villagers and still have them gather, but then it's kind of like, what's the point of even putting them there to begin with, you know? But yeah, I mean, let's say you put them on here because you're good on your economy and you don't need any more economy, so you put 25 villagers here and you have 25 more military. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad, but I just don't think it's as useful as you would initially think, because you know, it requires you to not need those 25 villagers to be getting economy at all. And I think that's a pretty rare scenario. You're gonna have to be extremely late in the game to like make use of this, I think. So I think, I don't want to rule this out. I don't want to say it's not useful, but I just think, especially earlier in the game, you're really going to be wanting using the founder ceremony to boom and stuff like that, or, you know, war ceremony for damage, all that kind of stuff. I think this is actually pretty niche, and I feel like it's only going to be very useful in like a very, very late game, in like some kind of 4v4 or 3v3, or a treaty game, I guess. In those in those games, I could see it being useful. Yeah, I mean, it'll definitely be useful getting more military, but just know you're giving up a lot to actually get that extra population space, so you're going to need plenty of resources. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and hop into the last thing, the big buttons for the Haudenosaunee. So we have all of these from the town center. So we have Haudenosaunee Scouting Party. So this delivers 5 tomahawks. This is actually mainly useful for an 11 tomahawk rush if you're going for that. It only costs 500 food. So this is pretty good for rushing. Or I guess defending too if you're going for like a boom or something and you need a quick defense. So pretty good actually, very useful. And then we have the same kind of idea, delivers 10 tomahawks. I think these aren't as good because look, it costs 500 food, 500 gold. I mean, that's a lot for 10 tomahawks, I feel like. And then we have 500 food, 500 wood, 500 gold, 10 to 15 tomahawks. I think these are not very good, but this one, since it only costs food, I think is actually pretty good. And it, in particular for the big button rush, it's obviously, you know, necessary for that. So in the big button rush case, you're definitely going to want this. These, I see more as like a panic defense measure if you really need to, but I don't really see them being that useful. Let's move on to the market. I think the market has the normal, New Year's festival, so you get 2000 XP. So like I said, similar to kind of like the European, I think it's called mercantilism upgrade from the mosque. You know, you're just getting XP for shipments. Obviously, if you have extra resources, just throw at this, you know, getting more shipments is always going to be good. So obviously it's going to be good if you have the extra resources to spare for that. I can't remember if this is just an upgrade, but you have rawhide covers hit points by 20% for canoe and war canoes. Then we have lacrosse for war hut. So let's see, all war hut unit range increases. So adds 2 to ranged attack, adds 2 to ranged attack, and adds 2 line of sight. It's weird that, maximum range. Okay, sorry, I read that wrong. Yeah, so it adds 2 to the maximum range of all these units, and it adds 2 to the line of sight. So it is very expensive, 600 wood, 600 gold, but this is actually extremely good. I mean, 2 extra range is nothing to scoff at, and 2 line of sight also is very useful. So if you're later in the game and you have the resources to spare, I think this is actually like a pretty awesome big button upgrade. I don't think a lot of civs have access to something like that. And I can't remember if it's this civ or someone else, but you could also combine this with the team infantry line of sight increase, and your infantry will just have like some kind of insane like 8 plus 8 line of sight, which would be pretty awesome to see. And you can also combine it with these prowlers with their stealth for some great ambushes. So definitely some cool tactics to be had with those upgrades. Let's see, we have the Community Plaza, Secret Society, War Chief gains a healing ability. We have Tribal Marketplace. Villagers at the Tribal Marketplace generate XP. Like I've said in my previous videos, I don't see this being that useful. I mean, if you're gonna gather from like a ton of mines, and you have this extra food and wood, sure, I mean, go ahead and take it. But if you're gonna be transitioning to estates in the later game, then don't even bother with this, I would say. But yeah. I don't know. I might be downplaying this. I need to try this out a bit more, to be honest. I think in games, yeah, where you're going to be going for a ton of mines, this could actually be really good for the shipments, but I think I need to just test it out more. But right now, as of now, I'm not feeling it, to be honest, but I'm going to try it out more. And then we'll see we have a couple of interesting economy over time upgrades that they have for these big buttons. And it's kind of a theme here. So you see Maple Festival, 250 food, 250 wood, and you get 500 coin every 10 minutes of the game, length up to 30 minutes. So it delivers 3 huge chests of coin over 10 minutes. So actually pretty good, I think. Obviously, if you're going for a booming strategy, more for treaty games or team games, I would say. I mean, obviously, it could still be useful for 1v1s, but I think this is going to take a long time to pay off, so generally I don't think that if you're already going to be in the Fortress Age and now you're getting it, that's 10 more minutes past the Fortress Age. I mean, the game's probably going to be over by that time, so I think it'd be hard to say that this would be useful in a 1v1 kind of game that won't last that long, most likely. But then you'll see we have kind of the equivalent upgrades. So from the farm, we have Maple Festival. So you get 500 coin every 10 minutes of the game. Oh, so these are actually the same. Yeah, okay, so these both deliver the chest of coins. You can get 2 of these, actually. And then you have Horse Secrets from the Corral. Horsemen and Musket Riders are faster by 10%. So yeah, if you're building a lot of horsemen, obviously this will be pretty useful. It's not cheap, but it's not too bad. 400 wood, 400 gold. I think the infantry one would probably be more impactful, I would say, than this. But obviously, if you're later in the game and you're really using your cavalry, then this is going to be good and especially for raiding and stuff like that. It's good. And then we have the Woodland Dwellers. So this will deliver. It's kind of like this Maple Festival with the coin, but except this is delivering wood. So that delivers 3 huge cords of wood over 10 minutes. So obviously, same kind of reasoning before. I think this one you can actually get a lot earlier. So, yeah, both of these actually. So these I could maybe see. If you invest in these really early and you're going for like a fast fortress kind of strategy, like Fortress Age aggression, if you can fit these into your build, I could actually see it being pretty useful because you'll be having a very dominant economy because over the next 10 minutes of the game, you're getting all this extra resources than the enemy is. So yeah, I would say if you're going for heavy mid-game aggression and you can invest in these early in your build order, I could actually see this kind of paying off for you. But yeah, you'd have to try to get these as early as possible and still do a fast fortress. So still, I think it's going to be challenging, and I still think it'd be more useful for treaty and team games. But I think it's possible to use in a 1v1, and I'm going to try it out. But yeah, definitely more useful for a booming type game. And then lastly, in that same kind of vein, basically same thing here. Oh wait, sorry, I thought there was a food one. I don't know where the food big button is. I thought there was one that gave food over time, but maybe I'm wrong. But anyways, siege drills, so siege workshop units are faster by 10%, 500 food, 500 wood. I think that's actually very useful, and it doesn't cost gold, so that's pretty nice. I think it's pretty reasonable to get this upgrade. It's very nice because the light cannons are already pretty maneuverable, not over long distances, but over short distances they have basically double the movement speed of falconets. So making them 10% even faster, plus there's also some cards to make them faster. So, I mean, you can make these guys like pretty mobile. So basically they're going to be a lot less vulnerable to cav raiding them. So I mean, it depends on your strategy. Like, you know, it's not going to be that useful if you're used to just kind of sieging their base while protecting your cannons with melee units or something. But if you're doing some kind of strategy where you're not going to be heavily protecting your cannons, or they have some unit that's good at getting past those kind of defenses, then in those cases this will be pretty useful because you know, obviously it's just making your siege that much more maneuverable, which is never a bad thing. I mean, fast siege is always going to be helpful when sieging. So yeah, I think overall this could be pretty useful for all kinds of scenarios where you just need to get your siege in and out, or just, you know, flank around, all that kind of stuff. So pretty cool. Definitely unique. I think this is probably the only civ that gets like faster siege. So it's kind of interesting. I think not a lot of opponents would be ready for this. You know, they wouldn't expect your siege to be very maneuverable. So yeah, I think it could catch a lot of people off guards if you're just, you know, running in rams, running in mailets, all that kind of stuff. Just out of nowhere very quickly. I think, yeah, you could definitely get some surprise attacks and destroy a lot of buildings. So Yeah, I think that one is a pretty good big button, I think. And I was just gonna do a quick once over because I was pretty sure that there was a food version of one of these, but yeah, I could definitely be mistaken about that. Let me just check real quick. Yeah, maybe not. I guess I was thinking of something else. Well, anyways, so that was all the unique units and technologies for the Haudenosaunee. So with that, let's go ahead and hop in and look at some of the cards so you guys can get an idea of what kind of decks you're going to be building. So now onto the unique and team cards for the Haudenosaunee. So starting off, we have the 3 villager and 5 village shipments and the exploration age and commerce age. So these unit shipments, I would say these are kind of your go-to a lot of the times. Obviously any civ that has 2 to 3 or 4 villager shipments in their first stage, that's almost always when you're going to go first. So I would say this is no exception here. 3 villagers is pretty much always going to be your go-to for this civ to just get those villagers out. And this isn't always the case for commerce age, but I would say a lot of the times it can still be the best because 5 villagers is a lot to not take. You can choose crates. You choose like 600 crates over that, but I would say it's kind of a hard pass to not take the 5 villagers. And if you're not taking them, it's more likely a rest strategy than not. If you're booming, then I would say you pretty much want to take the 5 villagers. Then we have, I should go over this. So one of the unique things about this civ is most civs only have 300 food, 300 wood, 300 gold. But the Haudenosaunee had this thing with a lot of their crates where they actually split it between them too. So you can also send 100 food, 100 wood, and 100 coin. So you're splitting the resources between the 3. So you see the same thing. You don't get actually the 700 food and 700 wood, for example, but you can get 800, but that's split evenly. So you get 300 food, 300 wood, and 200 coin. So, this can be good in certain situations. I would say sometimes it's also a little disappointing for like a fast fortress strategy. This is actually probably going to be worse off because you'd rather just have like 700 gold, I would say. But it does help you just like balance out your economy a little bit more because it gives you a little bit of everything. So in that sense, it's kind of nice for like when you're trying to build military because you can just send this and you get overall more resources, but it's split between everything. So just your overall economy is just better than most other civs. So that's kind of nice. But yeah, so it's okay in some situations, and sometimes you actually wish that it wasn't the case. But yeah, overall, just kind of interesting take, just a different take. Next, we have 4 native scouts, delivers 4 native scouts, and enables your war chief to recruit additional scouts. I don't really prioritize this. I think the thing about the civ is you're normally going to be going for some kind of rush or kind of like fast fortress boom or something, or if you're in like a big team game, going for like a much later game. So I can't really ever see a case where this is going to be that useful, so I kind of ignore it. High Chief, your war chief is better in combat. His aura now also slightly increases siege damage around him. Slightly increases building hit points. Oh, okay. So I was thinking the Lakota one that increases siege damage. This actually just increases building hit points, which makes me, it's kind of like a more defensive playstyle. So, maybe you could try something with having him around your buildings in a defensive strategy if you're booming or something. But again, if you're booming, you're going to be trying to get these 5 villagers or these crates out so you can go up faster. So to me, this seems kind of like a useless card. Like it's going to be a waste of a card if you're going for that kind of strategy. Fur trade, when the shipment arrives, all of your current food is exchanged for a greater amount of coin. All these kind of cards, I always kind of say the same thing. I think they're useful in niche situations. For example, in a treaty game where you have a ton of food and you just want to have a ton of coin or something. I think in normal games, I don't think it's kind of like a waste of a card in my opinion. So just a niche card, try it out in treaty games, but I wouldn't normally take this card for normal games. And so we already talked about these mixed crates. Oh, I should also mention real quick, I didn't put these in the deck, but each age, so for example, in exploration age, you have 1 travois, and then in commerce age, you get 2 travois, and so on. 3 travois here. So you can also get these from the community plaza that spawns them and stuff like that. I would say it's never a bad card to send. So depending on the age, just think of this as like a wood crate. So if you send it in the first stage, you could build like a house. So that's like 125 wood shipment essentially. Or if you build a war hut, then I guess I can't remember what that wood cost is, but like a 200 to 300 wood card. If you build an estate, then that's like a 600 wood card. So think of it like that. So, you know, if you send 3 in the Fortress Age, you could get like 3 estates, and that's, what is that, like an 1800 wood card? So in that case, that's actually super useful when you think about it like that, if that's what you need to do to transition your economy. So Travois are very good in those kind of cases, but you know, you can spawn them from your community plaza. You can also get like 4 from aging up, I think, to the industrial age. So I think you'll probably have enough, and I don't think you need to use your shipments on it. So that's kind of my general opinion on these guys. I don't think they're ever bad to take, but I think you can get enough from them from spawning them from your plaza and from aging up that you probably shouldn't need them from shipments. But yeah. So we have advanced scouts. Like I said, for scouts, I never really worry too much about scouts. Obviously, they'd be good for map control, but to me, increasing their combat damage is just, it's not the point of scouts to begin with, and going for some early scout aggression seems kind of pointless, because you're, you know, you'd rather send 7 Iana or 6 Tomahawks or something, so why would you do that? Seems kind of useless. While we're on that subject, actually, I should mention all these unit cards are very good if you're going for that kind of Commerce Age rush. So 7 Iana, 6 Tomahawks, 4 Kanye Horsemen, those are all very good cards to send in the Commerce Age if you're going for that early Commerce Age aggression. So just keep that in mind, pretty good cards. And then we have, this card is pretty interesting, Town Destroyer makes your War Chief do 1400% more siege damage. This is actually pretty useful. You might not think so, but if you go for that early aggression, you sent your first unit card, and they're on the back foot, but you need to kill their buildings, you can send this, and your War Chief will actually do insane siege damage. I'm talking about, like, they can kill houses in, like, I think it's like 4 or 5 hits or something. It's actually pretty nuts how much siege damage your War Chief will do. So, and against the town center, you know, if you have your Tomahawks and your War Chief just going at it with this card, they should take it down pretty fast. So it's more of a you're already winning and you need to win more card, not so much, you know, you're on the back foot kind of card. So good in that situation. And I would say, you know, not a terrible card to play in general. Like, if your War Chief is doing that much siege damage, it's not bad to have in general. Even for, like, Fortress Age aggression, if you win the fight, you know, you're taking down their buildings, you know, your War Chief's going to be up there just helping your troops. And if he's taking down buildings very fast, it's going to help anyway. So not a card I would prioritize if you're not doing that really early aggression, but it's not a bad card, I would say. Then we have New Ways. This is just giving you the European arsenal improvements, so you can get things, you know, like cavalry HP, cavalry siege damage, infantry attack, all that kind of stuff. So pretty good just for some extra upgrades going into the later portions of the game. So any game that goes late, you're probably going to want to take this just for the extra upgrades to your troops. Then we have Great House. Town centers are cheaper and inflict more damage when garrisoned. Yeah, so I mean, if you're going for a boom strategy, this will help you defend your town center. I would say just try to go fast fortress. I mean, to me, I mean, you can send this card in an emergency, and I could see that, so maybe you can have it in your deck for a booming strat, but I feel like if you really need this, you're probably in trouble anyways. Like, just try to defend and boom, get to fast fortress as soon as possible and get some troops out. You know, you're not like the Portuguese. You don't have 3 town centers. You know, the Portuguese can get away with something like this because they have free town centers, but I feel like for a civ like this, where you're not going to have a bunch of town centers early, this is probably not a very good card. But I think on the counterpoint, if you do want to help some defense, I think this card can be pretty good. So your houses now have a small range attack. So if you set up your base right, and either you have like a front wall if you want to do that, or if you just spread them out amongst like where your gathering is, I think this is actually can be a viable, you know, in replacement of like this. I would take this. I would take warehouses. So your houses will actually be helping you kill the enemies, and since, you know, you will be spamming houses because you need the pop, I think this is a more viable defensive strategy if you wanted to do that than trying to just use your town center. So I would say try this if you need some extra help on defense. I think it could actually help quite a bit. Then we have battlefield construction. Your foot warriors can build war huts, corrals, and siege workshops. So yeah, I mean, a lot of civs have something like this. Obviously, it can be very useful because you can build forward barracks and stuff very easily with your foot warriors. So, I mean, this is always going to be a good card, just in general. Like, having your units be able to build barracks is never a bad thing. So, yeah. Not a card I'm going to prioritize early, but just always a good card to have in your deck. Then we have Conservative Tactics, same kind of thing, but for stats. So Tomahawks, Hyenas, Mantlets have more attack and hit points. So yeah, I mean, all those troops you're going to be using, and you're getting 10% extra HP and attack, so that seems really good. I definitely have this card in your deck. Canoes are cheaper, sure. If you're on a naval map, canoes would cost 25% less. Sure, it's going to be good on naval maps. Siege damage, all Haudenosaunee siege weapons do more damage. So they actually have a few siege upgrade cards in here, plus they can move fast and all that kind of stuff. So it depends on your playstyle. I would say if you're going a little bit more heavy on the artillery and stuff like that, this could be very useful. I'm trying it out with like a siege only strategy, so it's pretty fun. But I would say, you know, if you have a normal makeup, like if you only have like 2 to 3 light cannons, probably not going to be worth it. But if you have, say, like 5 light cannons and you have, you know, 5 rams and 10 mantlets all mixed in, then I could see this being very useful. And you're going to be, you know, doing a ton of damage to buildings and all that kind of stuff. So if you're going for a little bit more of a heavy siege strategy, or just in general playing a later game where you're going to have more siege, then I could see this being very useful and just, you know, having this card in your deck. So in that situation, it could be, but if you're just going for one of those Commerce Age rushes, I wouldn't bother. It's not going to come into play. Siege combat, so again, like I said, they have a lot of these cards around siege. So in general, just my rule of thumb here, if you're planning on playing a later game, either a treaty or just like a big team game, 3v3, 4v4, then I do take these cards. But if you're going like a 1v1 and you're either going for Commerce Age rush or Fortress Age aggression, then I would not take these. I don't think they're going to be useful enough. So that's kind of my general take on all these, but I'll read them off anyways. So all their siege weapons get increased damage and hit points by 15%. So it can stack with that, which is pretty good. Then we have Siege Discipline. All Siege Workshop units cost less population. So same reasoning, but this one is actually just kind of a cool one to mention. So for example, Mantlets will cost 1 population, which is pretty insane. It's like if you're playing a longer game, the fact that those Mantlet siege units cost 1 population is actually pretty insane if you look at their stats. I mean, you're talking about a unit that has like double all the stats of a Musketeer, and now it costs 1 population. I mean, just think about that. That's insane. If you have the economy to back that production, that's insane. I mean, you can run over other armies with this when you're population capped. Think about it like this too. You can also combine this late game with your ceremony to increase your population cap. So in a way, they can almost play like the Dutch, where they just have this giant military. So I think it's pretty cool. They're similar to Dutch in that way, in that they can have a much larger military fielded than a lot of other civs can. So pretty cool. Then we have Haudenosaunee Woodworking. Receives for free all marketing woodcutting upgrades. I think cards like this generally are pretty trash, to be honest, because I feel like you should be getting the woodcutting upgrades as you go. If you go for some strategy that doesn't require that and then you send this, I mean, it's okay, but it's still not that much resources saved. So in my opinion, I don't like this card. I would rather just get my wood upgrades when I need them and go from there. Oneta support ships 10 villagers and 1 covered wagon. I actually really, so I'm not going to go over all these support cards, by the way. There's a lot of different support cards in here, and a lot of them are useful, but this is my favorite one, and I feel like this is what makes them really stand out from a lot of the native civs and the support shipments. So this one is really cool because it's one of the few ones that actually is like a very nice booming card. So you get to the Fortress Age, you try to send this immediately, and you get 10, think of this, you get 10 villagers, and you get 1 covered wagon, which is like 500 wood. I mean, that's an insane, like that's probably one of the best cards. You know, obviously it costs 1,000 gold, but if you can do that, this is actually like one of the best booming cards in the game because of how much you get. You literally get 10 villagers. That's so many villagers, plus a town, plus a covered wagon. I mean, this is insane, honestly. Like, yes, you do need 1,000 gold, but if you can afford that, you want to get this as fast as possible. So if you're going for like a really, you know, like a booming strat, they can actually, they're not obviously like as good as like Brits or Portuguese or something, but you can do like get to the Fortress Age, get this card, and do like a very decent Fortress Age boom with this card, just because it's that good. And you just got to make sure you have enough gold to afford it. So yeah, overall, I think this card is very good, and without it, they would be they would be a lot worse just because they wouldn't be able to boom very effectively, and this kind of sets them apart from a lot of the other native civs. Yeah, by the way, these are some of the other cards you can get. I don't think any of them are nearly as good. There's some interesting ones, like you can get Mohawk support, sends 5 elite mantlets and 6 elite rams, so just a bunch of siege weapons. So that's a cool one, but I don't think it's that great in general. I also should mention real quick, because I didn't put any of these in, they do have kind of like all the normal cavalry and infantry upgrades. So they have infantry attack and hit points, HP up by 15%. Same with cav, except they're in 2 cards. HP by 15%, attack by 15%. And then along with all these other siege upgrades, they can also get siege hit points. So siege hit points up by 15%. So yeah, they can get pretty tanky and pretty high attack damage siege when all these are sent. And then they can also get the native warrior combat. So native warriors hit points up by 20%, attack damage up by 20%. So yeah, they can still get all those kind of unit upgrades and all that kind of stuff. And also, make all your artillery train faster. Card engineering school, which is pretty nice to combo. If you're going for a siege heavy strategy, you can make them train really fast. So that's pretty nice too. So let's go ahead and cover the last age, Industrial Age. So we have Haudenosaunee Siege Party. This is the one that sends 4 elite mantlets and 6 elite rams, so it's similar to that support card, but it's free. So that's kind of cool. They have 7 mantlets. You can send this infinitely, so you can get, in the late game, you can kind of just spam these mantlets out. I'll go over this one more in a second, but let me go to these. You have Old Ways. All their big button upgrades have their price greatly reduced. In general, unless you absolutely didn't get any big button upgrades, I just wouldn't get this. I think, obviously, it would save you a lot of resources if you waited to get all of them. But I think before you get to the Industrial Age, you want to get some of these big buttons, because their big buttons, they take 10 minutes to get the full effect. So you don't want to wait and then send this and then send a 10-minute big button improvement. Like, you want to get those out earlier. You want to get those going earlier. So to me, for this civ, this is, well, even for most civs, but especially this civ, this is actually pretty useless, because you don't want to be waiting for these. You want to get them as soon as you can to start getting the timer on the 10 minutes down, just in case the game doesn't go that long. You want to start getting those resources flowing from the big buttons. So pretty useless. I would never take this card for this civ. 10 Huron allies. I don't know why I put this in here, but it's another just infinite one. They're basically the same as the mantlets, but I actually think their stats are a little worse. So I would just take the mantlets over this, because they'll get all your upgrades too. Yeah, I would say the one thing about this civ that I'm not a huge fan of is I think their Industrial Age cards are pretty trash, honestly. They get all the unit cards, but like if you're a European civ, you get like 2 factories, and you get a card where you can like rebuild your forts. Like, you get these very powerful cards, and for them, I just don't know. Like, they just don't get useful cards. All they can really do is spam these mantlets. They can send 4 like cannons, they can send 8 gendarmes, but like it's only 8 in the Industrial Age. Like, is it really gonna do that much? So yeah, I mean, in general, I would say that is one thing that I'm really not a fan of with the civ, is just how lacking their Industrial Age cards are. So, you have a lot of nice booming cards, you have these siege upgrades, you have a lot of stuff, and then you think, like, oh, so they're gonna have like a pretty decent late game, and then you realize, well, you don't get 2 factories. They get, the 10-minute overtime resource cards. So I don't know, it's just kind of weird, right? Like, you have the setup for a booming civ, but then you don't have like any amazing late game shipments for them. So what's the point of booming, So yeah, that's kind of what I think of these cards in the Industrial Age. I think I haven't really found one that I've been very impressed with. They have the kind of like the normal villager attack, 200%, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, they're all just kind of unit cards, and none of them are that great. Like, at this point in the game, you'll be able to build 16 tomahawks, no problem, or you should be able to. So what's the point of this shipment? I think it's just, and you can only send it 1 time even. So, it's just, they're just really not that good. So yeah, I would say of the cards, that is the one thing that I really dislike about them. I think if they got just 2 or 3 really good cards in the Industrial Age, like a factory kind of thing, then I think the Civ would just be a lot more viable. I think that's kind of one of their main weaknesses right now. It's just the lack of really good cards in the Industrial Age. So yeah, I would say like if you're going for that kind of boom with these cards that are kind of set up for that, you should try to attack in the early Industrial Age, if not the late Fortress Age, just because like, yeah, I mean, you're not gonna have factories and stuff, so you need to do something, right? Because you're not, there's not much to look forward to once you get here. So like all the native civs, you want to attack early, but the civ would make you think that maybe you can go into the late game, but then you realize you don't have very good cards in the Industrial Age, so it's kind of like a trick. It's like, oh, you can boom, but then you don't have any good cards or units to make up for it, so what was the point? So yeah, just be aware of that. Kind of unfortunate, but that's how it is. Let's go ahead and move on to the team cards. So we have Team 4 Sheep. I'm just gonna skip over this, not even give this card the time of day. Team 2 Native Scouts delivers 2 Native Scouts and increases their damage against Treasure Guardians. I think I said the same thing in the Lakota video, but I don't know. I'm just not a fan of these kind of cards, scouting cards in general. Just take the 3 villagers. You could try to send us a second, third, fourth shipment, but again, it's very hard with all of these team cards early because you have to overcome like what's the next best alternative? The next best alternative is 5 villagers in a Commerce Age. So really, you're gonna send 2 native scouts over 5 villagers? No, you're not gonna do that. So don't do that. Don't send this. I wouldn't send it. Then we have Team Sheep Outpost. Again, don't send it. As I say, if you guys find a cool strategy that actually utilizes these, let me know. I'd love to know, but yeah, for me, I just look at these and I just think like they just seem so useless, to be honest, comparatively to like other cards that you can get. So I just look at them and I'm like, yeah, I'm just really not interested. Team Sheep Docks, same kind of deal. Good for a naval boom, I guess, with the team on a naval map, but I think the Lakota also have this and the British also have this card. So, I don't know. I mean, you could try to do something silly where you all stack Team Sheep Docks or something. I don't know if that'd really be that useful, but it'd be kind of funny to try out. But either way, I think just not a great card. Team Furrier, everyone gathers faster from hunted animals and berry bushes and a little bit of a higher yield as well. Similar kind of thing. I think you're going to send this after 3 and 5 villagers. So this will be like your 3rd shipment, probably at the earliest. By that point, you killed a lot of hunts. You're trying to go to the Fortress Age. You need a lot of these Fortress Age cards. So I just don't think you'll be able to fit this in. And basically the same thing with Team Food Silos, except this is probably even worse because, well, it's worse in a way, but this would be better to have for like a later game. Because at least, in the later game where everyone has mills and farms, then you'll improve the gather rate for everyone from those. So, I mean, you could just keep this card and send this like way later once you've sent a lot of other good cards. But, it's not that great. It's only 10%, so just take other cards, I think. I think a lot of these are just not worthwhile. Same kind of thing here. Team 2 Villagers heals injured units. Same as just Team 2 Surgeons, like the European civs have, and I always think that's kind of a pretty useless card. Obviously they can heal, but like I don't think they do enough. Team Scout Infantry, Team Infantry line of sight increased by 8. I want to check actually if this stacks. I think I don't know if it's Lakota. Someone has the same thing where they add 8 line of sight to infantry, so it would be interesting to see if that actually stacked and how big your line of sight could get. But either way, I think this is actually a good card. It's just that you don't want to send this like in Age 2 or again, it's just hard to find when to send these. I think the only valid time you could actually send this is like very late in the game where you've pretty much sent all the stuff you want to do. Like you basically be in the Industrial Age and then you realize you have terrible shipments, so now you send Team Infantry line of sight, something like that, which you could do. So, I mean, yeah, sometimes there's not a lot of other good cards that you're going to take, so maybe you can fit this in. If you were going to try to fit one in, this is probably the one I would take, because the 8 line of sight is pretty nice, especially with their other units like Forest Prowlers and stuff. So yeah, it's actually not too bad, so I like this card. I have a lot of these team cards. This is probably my favorite. It's just really nice for controlling the map, knowing when enemies are going to be hitting you, all that kind of stuff. yeah, I mean, and you can set up ambushes, move your artillery around. So yeah, it's very good for winning engagements. Team Native Warrior Societies, you can train more natives, build limit plus 20%. Definitely not as big of a fan of this one as I am of this one. If they're going to be building a lot of natives, of course it's going to be useful, but yeah, I think there's just better cards in this one. You know, in a big team game where this would be useful, I just think that natives probably won't be the deciding factor, so I wouldn't worry too much about that card. Team Medicine, Team Villagers Train Faster. This is another one. I initially thought, like, on paper this is really nice, but in practice it's only 15%. I just don't think it's that useful. You would have to be going for a really hard boom with everyone on your team, I think, to really get the most out of this that you could. And yeah, I think that's pretty rare, and that's not really going to happen. And even if it was going to happen, you have to remember the Haudenosaunee playstyle. If you're booming with this card to make really good use of it, you want to be booming all the way to like Industrial Age, and at that point, the Civ isn't the best in Industrial Age, so you're kind of booming to lose, you know, or like have it be more of like a 3v4 because you don't have as good of an Industrial Age. So I think it's kind of playing to the weakness of the Civ, and that's why I don't like this card. Then you have Team Birch Bark. So team all types of canoes cost less wood. Wood cost minus 15%. I mean, the only way this is going to be that useful is if you like your whole team is natives and you're on a water map, which is pretty rare. But sure, I mean, if you're on if you have a naval deck, I mean, throw this in. Obviously, like anything that reduces the wood cost for your whole team would be really useful. But yeah, I mean, I've probably never played a game with all native civs that could take advantage of this. So yeah, I mean, this is a very, very niche card. I mean, if it was just like all ships cost 15% less, very useful. Any naval map, it's gonna be good. But for team canoes, yeah, I mean, your whole team's gonna have to be the natives to take advantage of that. So it's pretty rare, and it's a Fortress Age card, which is like, you know, if you're in all native civs and you're in the Fortress Age, like against their European civs, like, I mean, you're probably gonna lose at that point. By the time you can send this card for all the native civs, you're probably gonna lose against, you know, European civs or Asian civs. So I don't really see when you would ever send this card. Anyways, team 10 Kree allies, Kree riflemen with good line of sight and range. Again, I mean, sure, it's not a terrible card, but not a great card either. If you're in the Industrial Age, I mean, sending basically 10 maybe slightly better skirmishers or I don't remember if these are musketeers or skirmishers, but either way, you're sending 10, you know, line infantry, skirmishers or musketeers to your allies. By that point, they should be like fully pop capped, so I don't see it being that useful at all. And again, if you're this late in the game, I mean, I should say, like, of their cards, I mean, sure, you're probably gonna fit this in because they have terrible Industrial Age cards, but yeah, just know that it's probably not gonna help that much. But I guess it's better than nothing. It'll at least probably like slightly help out your allies if you're in trouble. But yeah, not a terribly useful card. I think there's definitely better team cards out there, like the Team 5 Jaegers from Germans and stuff like that. But yeah, not terrible, but not great. And that's kind of the story of the Civ overall, as we'll get to in a little bit. But yeah, those are all their unique and team cards. With that, let's go to hop into some gameplay so you guys can get an idea of how the civilization plays overall. So now into the gameplay. So in this game, I was doing a big button rush, but the enemy ended up spamming outpost, so I switched into going for a fast Fortress Age. The link to that full gameplay is in the description below if you guys want to see that. Anyways, so I think this game kind of shows the general playstyle of the Civ overall, at least in 1v1 situations. And in my opinion, the Civ strength really relies on Commerce Age aggression, as they have a lot of good unit shipments in that age, such as Iana, Tomahawks, and so forth. And they have a very wrong rush strategy with the big button rush strategy that I'm showing off here. And they still have a pretty good Fortress Age, which should be backed by early aggression to slow down your opponents, so that if they have a really good fast Fortress Civ, that they don't outscale you. So if you're able to manage to keep up the aggression without overcommitting your troops, then you still have a pretty good chance of winning, even if they're able to get to the fortress or even the early Industrial Age. Now, in team games, I'm kind of undecided on how I feel about them. I think generally they're pretty decent, but not great in large team games, and pretty good in 2v2s. I think they get outclassed in late game economy of those games. However, I think with some of their special units, for example, with their Forest Prowlers, which are just skirmishers that can stealth, Mantlets, which can be upgraded to only cost 1 pop, and Light Cannons, which can be upgraded to only cost 1 pop, and those are very maneuverable. I think between all those unique units, there's a lot of room to outplay your opponents in team games to make up for the difference in economy between them and a normal European Civ. Even if they aren't the best at team games, they're still a ton of fun to play, and I would recommend anyone trying them out just because of how unique and fun they are to play. The Civ in general is kind of an oddity, and I'm pretty sure it's one of the least played and least well understood Civ by most players. You can, however, use that to your advantage, and if you get good enough with them, you can likely surprise your opponent with tactics they will not know how to deal with. The Civ, as others have stated before, is sort of like a crossover of a normal native Civ and a normal European Civ. So they get light cannons and other siege, unlike most of the other native Civs, and you also have many economic upgrades that help you keep up with the European Civ late games through their big button economy upgrades. However, they still don't get crucial cards like being able to send factories, which is where I think they still fall off in the late industrial age, like any other native Civ would. So to recap, overall, I think they're pretty similar to a lot of other native Civs in that their strength lies mainly in their early game aggression. However, I think with their good siege, unique unit options, and economic big button upgrades, that they're still a pretty good and versatile choice for any game where you can put on some early game aggression and not get stalled out into the late industrial age. So that's the Haudenosaunee for you. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for future Civ overviews. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.